mostly high conflict. Binge eating and purging, and depression and bulimia nervosa can adversely impact the response to family-based treatment. Good prognostic signs are early weight gain and full weight restoration is good. And as I mentioned, there's no evidence to support the benefits of inpatient versus outpatient treatment. So this is, not the diagram that I wanted to show you. So this is actually an example of a growth curve. I had another growth curve I wanted to show you to demonstrate what it looks like when a young person falls off their growth curve. This is a young person that we started treating. If you look at this area here, the child had not been diagnosed with an eating disorder at that time. So she was failing to grow. The family nor her physicians recognized that there was any significant problems related to that. Once we started family-based treatment, which you see here, over time, this child actually reoriented or recorrected on her growth curve. Okay, so I just want to talk about the phases of family-based treatment. And as I mentioned before, all these slides will be available on the website. The first phase really involves educating the parents. You don't want to scare them, but you want to let them know that it's a long-lasting disorder. If it's not treated, it can take years off of their child's life. It won't resolve without weight gain, and the prognosis is good with appropriate treatment. Generally, the kids are tough. They have wills of steel, which will help them later in life if they survive their eating disorder. And so we know we need to support the parents through the treatment. The first phase focuses principally on nutritional rehabilitation, first and foremost. We actively work with families around meal planning, calorie requirements, and activity levels, including enforcing something called home hospital, right? So children have restricted, limited activities that will not allow them, they can't participate in sports. They have to restrict their activities until they're gaining weight. We also have family therapy lunch sessions, which is a painful experience of watching these families have to try to eat lunch with their children. But it's all part of modeling appropriate behavior around feeding your children. We address practical concerns as well. Who's going to be at home? Who's going to be responsible for decision making? The key factor that will ensure success in treatment is supporting the authority of the parent. And that has to be emphasized in the treatment while maintaining your allowance with the child, which can be challenging. We act on the belief that parents know better than children at this juncture what their nutritional needs need to be. So parents prepare the food, the patient eats the food, and the patient is out of the kitchen. This is just the basic recommendations of meals, multiple meals a day, sometimes up to 4,000 calories a day at the beginning of treatment, with a weight goal of 1 to 2 pounds per week. And then throughout the therapy, I think it's really important that we actually help parents anticipate expectations around refeeding. So the reality is at the beginning of treatment, the youngster and the family have a fairly low tolerance for distress. Restricting food is actually a way of coping. Early in the treatment, particularly the first 3 to 4 months, what we expect is a much higher level of distress as we're refeeding the young person. And we really need to support parents through that. In the second stage, we expect that there'll be a lot of anger and defiance. So as the children are nutritionally better, there's much more resistance to the continued weight gain. And in stage 3, which happens later in the treatment, which is the dotted line that's actually moving upwards, what you should see is an increase in more age-appropriate behavior and more normal adolescent development. The second phase is weight maintenance. Maintaining the weight is the first and foremost goal.
1 minute. 1 minute.
15 seconds. Okay. Common pitfalls. Parents get tired, complacency sets in, and the parental learning curve is steep. And I just want to end with this slide. 2/3 reach full remission in 1 year, 90% partial remission, and 15% are non-responders who actually need a longer course of treatment.
I'm sorry.
I have 12 seconds.
I'm sorry. I want to give you some time, people may be interested to ask one or two questions.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor McIntyre. So that, you know, we are already 10 minutes behind the schedule, so we have some time. I know both topics are very important and exciting. Please, we will not have a panel discussion. It's going to be 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll have to shift the other session 5 to 10 minutes. You agree with that? Okay. So you have your mic. Okay. 1, 2, and 3. Maybe that's all. Okay.
Hello. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. My question is to Professor McIntyre. You've talked about treating depression and being aware of bipolar affective disorder was to exclude that before we can start with any antidepressant. My question is that sometimes when we are faced with a situation with the depressive episode of a patient, with several or recurrent depressive episodes in the past, and perhaps there's a query, hypomanic, I wouldn't say manic, but hypomanic question, hypomanic episode, maybe 10 years ago. So my question is, although it's predominantly is depression is the presentation, and perhaps there's a question mark about or clear manic episode or hypomanic episode, do I start with antidepressants because the patient is presenting with a depressive or recurrent disorder, or shall I start with mood disorder or both?
Great question. The way you just crafted the question captures what most of us can relate to in busy office practice. Antidepressants do not switch bipolar patients at a higher rate than placebo. Secondly, if in fact the scenario is as you described it, I would start with an antidepressant medication. The working diagnosis is major depression, and that will guide the treatment. There's a query about bipolar spectrum, but for now, in the imperfect world that we live in, you work with major depression, do the best you can. Given what you've said, anticipating the future, if I begin to see suboptimal outcomes of the sequential antidepressants, that may, in fact, shift me towards lamotrigine augmentation, lithium augmentation, or another atypical agent, which coincidentally have indications of both major depression and bipolar. So antidepressants are not anathema to bipolar disorder, but antidepressants would be clearly the treatment of first choice, pharmacologically, in people with MDD. They can certainly be prescribed in bipolar patients, but I think in the way you described your question, antidepressants first.
Thanks, Dr. Ali, consultant psychiatrist. I just wonder whether you could help me with some clarifications. In this part of the world, please make it. Yeah, very short. Not so many clarifications. No. Please. I didn't start yet. Please. This part of the world, people does not like medicine. So, as a part of my service, we started the Neuromodulation Center, and we are coming for the jump start for acute depression with ketamine and the maintenance therapy with the TMS. Yeah, I need your opinion on that one. Another question is, linked to it, with ketamine, no response after 2 sessions, we stop. But for how long we can give ketamine to start with as an initial treatment? Thank you.
Okay, good questions. On the first question, you're in an interesting area. What I like about the concept that you're doing is you're taking patients out of depression with ketamine and then transition to TMS. It's very interesting. As you know, there's no evidence base supporting what you're doing. But conceptually, what you're doing, I think, is ahead of the curve. And in fact, I think there's an increasing interest now to use these rapid onset treatments for a short period of time, get people out of depression, and then maintain them on something that's safe. So I think the concept's exciting. You're definitely a maverick. You're doing something very different. On the second point, what we have found in our clinical experience is not what the research shows on the slide. The research on the slide shows miraculous improvement in one treatment. Well, I have found in my clinical career that gravity almost kicks in, and things come back down to earth. That's not what we see. Some people have these incredible improvements in one treatment, but what we find is most people start to really show significant benefit after the third and fourth infusion. We do it twice a week, half a milligram per kilo over 40 minutes for the first 2 weeks. And in those cases, what we do, if the person's not responding to the first two, we increase the dose from 0.5 to 0.75 for 2 more infusions. So I think just stay the course for third and fourth treatment. No benefit after 4, we forget it.
Thank you very much for both speakers. Just a quick question to do with the genomic testing. Unfortunately, I haven't got much experience when it comes to genomic testing, and I'm really interested to know whether this is readily available and frequently requested, and your experience with this McIntyre, please.
Yeah, so a couple of comments around that. There's about 30 different proprietary products around genomic and genetic testing. The companies that make those products believe very strongly in the offering of those products. And there's been a push by some of these companies, and they've been very successful because they're very aggressive at marketing, to in fact get all patients screened for genetic and genomic testing. The evidence supporting that's not there. The evidence supporting some people in some circumstances being genetic and genomically testing, I think is there. I don't know what's available here in the Gulf, admittedly. We have many of these products available in Canada. I don't use most of them. I use them in some circumstances. I mentioned one about, in carbamazepine and non-Chinese. In patients who are sequentially intolerable, that seems not unreasonable. There's a few other select examples. But in fact, the evidence right now would not support the routine genomic genetic testing. What I'm concerned about is expectancy bias. A lot of colleagues tell me in the United States and Canada, oh, I did a gene test, and the gene test says pick from this bin of treatments like fluoxetine. I put my patient on fluoxetine and they got better. And then they conclude, oh, the gene test helped me. The gene test didn't help you at all. You don't know that. You need to do randomization. And the big studies, in fact, have failed to show that randomization provides a meaningfully robust benefit. However, in the details and some of the weeds of the study, there's some suggestion it could help some people. So that's how I strongly state. The companies who make these products have been very angry at me. They've been sending their henchmen after me. But I do think, in fact, they do harm to patients when they sell them nonsense. And so that's why I've been very strongly against the routine use of it until we get better evidence.
Thank you. We have one or two. One on this side, one on this side, and one on that side. Please.
So McIntyre, thank you for excellent talk. What's the earliest age of vortioxetine that you would use in children? And secondly, you said that with subsyndromal symptoms of hypomania, you use typical antipsychotics.
Yeah.
Why and which one?
Let me do the second one first. I don't use typical, it probably is the audio, it's atypical. So I have not prescribed a typical antipsychotic in a long time, more than 10, 12 years. They induce TD at a higher risk, they induce dysphoria, I don't prescribe them. Atypicals are what I go to very often. I tend to use some treatments that are here, like aripiprazole. Lorazepam, I don't think is here yet. I'm looking for confirmation.
It's available.
It's available. So lorazepam I would use, which has been the most studied. We did some work on that in mixed. Aripiprazole, one you're going to get very soon called brexpiprazole. I don't think we should be using weight gain promoting antipsychotic drugs. I think it's deleterious. It's harmful to these patients. So we try to avoid them. On the other point around vortioxetine, I don't see children. I see 18 and higher, so I've not used it myself. But the company I know is looking at vortioxetine in children. This is the only one that the FDA recognizes as pro-cognitive, and we all know that children with depression have serious pro-cognitive problems. What I'm concerned about is that the anti-psychiatric patient movement has been very successful at scaring doctors and nurses in America and Canada not to prescribe antidepressants to children. It's a disaster. Clearly some kids benefit from antidepressants. Most don't, but some do. But because most clinicians are so frightened because of the anti-psychiatry campaign against use of these drugs, too many kids are not being appropriately treated with pharmacotherapy.
Thank you. Please.
So the reality is that currently there are only 2 antidepressants approved for the treatment of depression in children, and we know that's fluoxetine and escitalopram. Escitalopram for adolescents. The other issue is that current recommendations are that the children who are treated with antidepressant medications, that we need to use an evidence-based psychotherapy as supportive treatment. That long-term, we don't know the developmental impact, but that black box warning did frighten a lot of people and stop them from treating depression in young people, which is really unfortunate because most of your developmental milestones, the important skills you require to be a successful adult are acquired during adolescence.
Last question, please.
A short question as you'd like me to do, but I think it will need a long answer. I hope you'll give me some answer. It is both actually for Professor McIntyre and Professor Tami. Why are we facing increasing the prevalence of both depression and eating disorder in spite of all the developments in both biological and psychological treatment? Could we, or I mean, in the words of Basil van der Kolk in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, are we practicing 19th century medicine by treating symptoms rather than causes? And what could be the cause for the 2 disorders? Thank you.
Why are we seeing more depression?
That's an excellent question. I think that there are multiple factors. We're seeing we're seeing increases in rates of suicide. They've not declined in the last 20 years. I think that there are a multitude of factors, some of which I think are stress-related. Not having the level of family support that's typically in place with families who are working. Kids are under increased amount of pressure. So the number of young people that I'm seeing who present with suicidal ideation is occurring at much younger ages. So I'm starting to see most of the kids used to be about 16. The number of kids that I'm seeing who are 10, 11, and 12 who are presenting with wanting to harm themselves or kill themselves are much younger. When I talk with them about, kind of what are the factors that are precipitating those concerns, they're mostly kids who at baseline are fairly anxious anyway. But the expectations that they experience from their social circumstances, from their parents, convey a level of stress that they don't understand. So 10 and 12-year-olds are not abstract thinkers. They're developing abstract thought. When you say something like, if you don't get into an advanced class in middle school, then you won't get into a good college. Many times for those kids, it's a literal interpretation and a fear that they will ultimately end up homeless and unsuccessful. So I think that it's the other factor that has been a significant contributor is the internet use and the constant access, so that children are frequently bombarded with lots of negative messages or hostile messages. Bullying capacity is expanded with internet use, right? So when something embarrassing happens on the internet, 50,000 people can know it very quickly, and you can see it over and over again. So I just think young people nowadays are just bombarded with a lot of messages and stressors that they just developmentally are not prepared to handle. The good news is increased parental intervention can help with some of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. My view on that, I've thought about this for a long time. Why are we seeing an uptick in depression? And it relates to suicide, although suicide and depression are not synonyms, they're obviously correlated. I've got 4 different suspects in my suspect line. I think that the wage stagnation that is perceived in many parts of the world is playing a significant role. I think that the wealth inequality in the economy of the world is, we see this happening in a political conversation, but it's affecting the science, it's affecting disease states, and we keep hearing glowing statistics from unemployment and so on. Much of that is actually not capturing reality.
tremendous amount of economic stress occurring in many parts of the world, perceived and real disadvantage economically. Thirdly, relates to technology. I do think that the British are correct in appointing a minister of loneliness. I think this is complete disengagement. Technology could be in part augmenting that, but there seems to be, in fact, an uptick in the sense of social disengagement, what Anil Durkheim would have called the suicides of anime. And fourthly, I think obesity and other epidemiologic transition diseases on the uptick. Obesity is not just a consequence and correlate of depression, it causes depression, as do other conditions. And so I think you have this combustible mix of wage stagnation, economics, you have in fact this alienation perception, and you also in fact have chronic diseases. And I think that's causing an uptick in this problem.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor McIntyre, Professor Benton. Thank you. Please allow me, Professor.
Huh?